Okay.
There are about 175 or so people here in the room, and looking forward to hearing you share with us a little bit about the power and the process of Leader in Me and the reaching the impact into the community. We just talked about a little bit about the roots of 80 points, and I'm going to let you take it on from here. So thanks so much for doing this show.
Okay. Hi, can you hear me okay, everybody? Hey, it's so good to be with you. How's the food? Bring me a little bit or save me some? All right. Hey, it's so good to be with you. By the marvels of technology, really appreciate the chance of coming in. I wish I could have been there tonight to have been with you in a live setting, but this is the next best thing. So I have about 2.5 hours I'd like to share with you. We'll keep it short, but I just have a few things to share with you. And thank you, Brian, for the introduction. I wanted just to also congratulate you on your 30th. I understand this is your 30th year anniversary for the Rotary Club. Congratulations. That's terrific. I think the Rotary Club is one of the great organizations of the world, and I really admire what you do. I'm also really excited to hear that you are a great supporter of the Leader in Me in your area, and that's terrific as well. I have spent, over the last few years, I've spent a lot of time in Canada, and I've grown to love hockey. All right. So here's what I wanted to share with you tonight. Brian told you a little bit about the A.B. Combs story and how they began. I think to understand the Leader in Me, you need to understand its roots. The roots really happened with the happenstance meeting between Stephen Covey, my father, and Muriel Summers. So let me tell you a little bit about my father, Stephen Covey. For raise of hands, how many of you have read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Okay, quite a few of you. Well, I read it when I was 20. When I was a teenager, people used to come up to me all the time, and they would cry on my shoulder, people I didn't know, and they would say, "Oh, you're Dr. Covey's son? His book changed my life." And I would say, as a teenager, I'd say, "Are you crazy? My dad? He changed your life?" And then I finally read his book when I was 20, and I thought to myself when I was reading it, boy, has he matured. So anyhow, a little bit about my father. He was, his grandfather ran a hotel. My father was being groomed to also run the hotel after he went to business school. So he went to business school and he graduated. My grandfather was so excited to get him going in the business to eventually run it. But while he was at business school, he fell in love with teaching and the idea of human potential. And so he decided he didn't want to run the family business running a hotel. So my grandfather approached him and said, "Okay, Stephen, are you ready to start moving into running the business?" And he said, "Father, I don't want to do it." He goes, "Well, what do you want to do?" He said, "I want to be a teacher." And my grandfather said back to him, "I never liked business either." And so my father went into teaching, and his focus was always on this idea of unleashing human potential. As a young person in his early 20s, he felt like my role in life, my mission is to help people unleash human potential. And so he became a professor and a teacher. For the next 30 years, this is where he developed the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It was based on research around the world as to why some people are happy and some people aren't, and why some organizations are successful and others aren't. And after 30 years, he published the 7 Habits, and the 7 Habits are based on these timeless principles of effectiveness, things like responsibility and vision and prioritization and teamwork and so forth. So that was the side of Stephen and where it came from his life. He was a teacher, and he loved the idea of unleashing human potential, and he believed that everybody had great worth and potential. One of his great sayings is this: leadership is communicating to another person their worth and potential so clearly they are inspired to see it in themselves. In other words, a true leader is somebody that inspires another person to see the greatness inside of them. Another one of his great classic quotes is this one. He always used to say this. He passed away about 1.5 years ago. But one of his great quotes was this: if you ever think the problem is out there, that very thought is the problem. In other words, most issues are internal issues, and the key to solving problems with other people is to work on ourselves first. So a little bit about my father. I wanted to tell you a couple things more about Muriel Summers. Excuse me for a second. Muriel Summers, as Brian told you, ran this school that was failing. We came up with this new idea of incorporating leadership into her school and using the 7 habits as one of the tools, and totally reinvented her school. I visited her school about 7 years ago for the first time, and I came home and I said to my wife, Rebecca, we need a new school. You should see the school I just saw. It was remarkable. And the first time I visited there, what I felt when I was in her school was this belief among all the staff, among all the teachers, that they thought every child had greatness and was a genius, had this incredible potential, and you could see it in the way they treated the kids, in the leadership roles and responsibilities they gave the kids, and teaching them how to set and achieve goals. Just remarkable. And about 7 years ago, I sat down with Muriel the first time I visited her school, and I said, Muriel, this is just amazing. I can't believe your school. I can feel the culture that you've established here. And she looked at me and she said, I'm trying to run a school, but every day I get principals from all over the world coming to my school to try to see what we're doing and to learn from us. And I'm trying to run a school, for crying out loud. And then she pointed at me with her amazing southern accent. She said, it is your moral imperative to do something about this. And so I thought, okay, we're going to do something about this. And so we studied what they had done. We found other schools that had copied their model. And this is where the leader in me came from. It was organic. It came from a desperate school. And now it's a process, as Brian mentioned, that's being used by over 2,000 schools around the world. And it's producing remarkable results. I wanted just to tell you 3 quick stories, okay? And then I'll close, and I'd be happy to take a few questions. But 3 quick stories. The first 2 stories took place in up there in Canada. First one is from a school, Joseph Welsh Elementary. And it's about a little boy named Riley. And Riley is a 3rd grader, and he has autism. And before he came to Joseph Welsh Elementary, he went and looked at a lot of other schools with his parents, and he'd come home all the time and he'd say, Mom, I'm so stupid. I'm dumb, and I shouldn't be going to school, and I can't read well. I don't have any friends. Well, they school shopped for a while, and finally they found a great school, this Joseph Welsh, which is a leader in me school. And when he came to that school, he was told he was a leader. He was given a leadership role, and they just embraced him. Well, a few months into this, every year the superintendent would ask the school, Joseph Welsh, to come present what they're doing at their school. And the principal, Mike Fritz, asked for volunteers to go with him to speak on what they're doing inside of their school. And so Riley volunteered. And Mike, principal, was really surprised, and he thought to himself, boy, I just don't know if he's ready to go give a presentation in front of the school board. But he gave him the opportunity. And we doing okay there?
We can hear you.
Yep, keep talking.
Okay, so I'll continue with the story. So Riley, with a few other kids, went to give a big presentation to the school board. The principal was kind of a little bit worried, didn't know what was going to happen. And Riley had prepared this big poster, brought this giant poster, and on it was a picture of his brain. He'd drawn a picture of his brain, and he got up in front of the school board and he said to the superintendent and the other attendees, he said, "This is my brain, and it works a lot different than other brains. And I have autism, and you have a lot of kids like me in your school system. And let me tell you how my brain works." And he talked about the red representing anger and the black representing loss of confidence and so forth, and he tried to explain how autistic people think differently. Well, by the end of the presentation, everybody was in tears. And he did a terrific job. And he went home, and Mike Fritz, the principal, was so excited and happy for him. And the next day, he came to school with a tie on, just like I've got on. And the principal thought, this is kind of strange. And the next day, a tie, and the next day, a tie. 30 days later, he was still wearing a tie. He ran into his mother, and he said, "Oh, hey, why is it that Riley's wearing a tie every day? Ever since he gave that speech, he's been wearing a tie." She said, "Well, you'll never guess what happens. After he gave that speech, he came home. He said, 'Mom, from now on, I'm wearing a tie.' She said, 'Well, why are you doing that?' 'Because important people wear ties.'" Riley is in 5th grade now, and he's still wearing a tie. It's hysterical. And he's doing terrific. But that's the power of the leader in me, the culture that believes in children and gives them opportunities to express themselves. And if you can take your toughest children, your toughest students, those who are struggling, those who have learning disorders, or those who don't come from a good home necessarily, and you can help them blossom like Riley, then that's the true sign of a successful program. So another quick story. One of the great things about the leader in me is it works because everyone is doing it. It's not just about something you give to the children. It's also about the adults in the school. It impacts them and helps them improve and change and become leaders themselves. It also gets into the home. We have so many great stories about how the homes have been impacted, but this one comes from Crestwood Elementary in Medicine Hat, Alberta, and David George is the principal. And David said that he had this new family move in, and Alex was a young boy. He was a 5th grader. He moved into the school. And Alex would go home, and he was learning the 7 habits, and he just loved them. It impacted him a lot. He'd go home and teach his family about the 7 habits. And about 3 months later, Alex's father showed up. His name was Andre. And he was a real tough guy, and he came in dressed with a muscle shirt with some tattoos on him. And he just said, "Principal George, I've been so impacted by the 7 habits. My son's been teaching them to me for the last several months. And I just can't believe that these habits are so powerful. And as he's been teaching me, I realized that I'm not living true to myself. I'm on parole in Washington State, the United States. And I've run away from my parole. And after my son's been teaching me the 7 habits, I realized I needed to be the man I'm supposed to be. And so I'm turning myself in. Because I have a history here, but I can't live the life I'm living right now with my son and what he's teaching me. I've got to face up to this." So he said, "Would you write me a letter of recommendation that I'm a good guy?" And so he said, "Yes, I will." And so he wrote a letter, and the authorities looked at all the evidence, and they said, the judge said, "Is there any reason why we shouldn't let this person continue to live his life where he's at? Is there any reason why we need to take him back and put him in jail?" And they decided not to, because he had such a good track record for the last couple of years, living a good life. And he had all these letters of recommendation. So Andre was able to continue to live in his home up there in Medicine Hat, and was greatly impacted by the 7 habits, as was his whole family. So that's the kind of impact this content can have on the adults in the school. It's said, this is a quote from one of the great educators. His name is Roland Barthes, and he's written about 20 books on education. This is what he said. It's very insightful. He said, the quality of the relationships among the adults within a school has more to do with the outcomes of the kids than any other factor. In other words, how well the adults get along in the school, how well they communicate and collaborate and solve problems, has more to do with the grades of the kids and the test scores and how well they feel about school than any other factor. So let me tell you a quick story about that. My kids go to a Leader in Me school. I'm very happy about that. I'm thrilled about it. But it wasn't a Leader in Me school many years ago. About 4 years ago, the school opened up. It was a brand new public school in my area, and everybody wanted to go because it had a beautiful facility. And so everyone applied, and there was a big waiting list, and there was a lottery, and luckily my kids got in. So we were excited. But after 1 year, they fired the principal. And so a new principal came in, and the next year they fired the next principal after 1 year. And everybody started leaving the school. And the problem was there was a bunch of little war going on inside the school between the upper grades and the lower grades. The teachers weren't getting along well, and there were these little factions that had begun, and so forth. So the third principal got hired. Suddenly there wasn't a waiting list anymore in the school. People were leaving, going to other schools. And I went to this principal and I said, Emma, you're only 30 years old. You've never been in administration before. You're going to get fired too. And I said, but let me show you something. I've got some frequent flyer miles. I want to fly you back to A.B. Combs. I want you to see what they're doing there. And this was actually about 5 years ago. So I flew her back to A.B. Combs, and she went to a leadership day, which is where they open up their school to the general public to show off what they're doing. And I watched her, and she cried the whole time. And she came back, and she said, I didn't know you could run a school this way. And so she began the Leader in Me inside their school. And I was very excited to see what would happen. And about 3 months into it, I dropping off my son at school, and I went inside to pick up some stuff. One of the teachers came up to me and said, oh, Mr. Covey, thank you so much for introducing us to the Leader in Me. It's working. It's amazing. I can't believe what's happening to our school. I said, what's different? And she looked at me and she goes, we like each other now. We like each other. We get along. And then I looked up and I saw some of the signs, and they had labeled everything in their school, like Leadership Alley and Win-Win Way and Seek First to Understand Hallway and so forth. And I ran to the principal that same visit, and I said, Emma, you're doing so great. Look, you've got everything named inside the school. This is terrific. You're really reinforcing leadership. And I said, I noticed that all the signs up there are in paper. They're written on paper or cardboard. As a parent, I'd be happy to donate a couple $100, whatever you need, to put those in permanent plastic. And she said, well, don't talk to me, talk to the 5th graders. It was their idea, and they're in charge. And so the next couple of weeks, I worked with the 5th graders via email, and I would write them and say, hey, I'm happy to donate to get plastic signs up. And they'd say, okay, Mr. Covey, we'll go and find some bids and get back to you. So they came back a little while later, and they said, well, we think the best bid is this one. It might not be the highest quality, but they're really a low price. So how about $74? How about that? And I said to Emma later on, I said to the principal, good job. This is what this is all about. It's about turning the school over to the kids, letting them blossom, letting them flourish, finding out what they're good at, and teaching them these 21st century life skills that are so important to every employer today, increasingly. The other day I was with a school, and I asked them, they were doing a student panel, and they had some kids up, and a bunch of adults, about as many as are in the room right now. And somebody raised their hand and asked one of the kids, well, what's different about your school now that you have the Leader in Me? And he thought long and hard, a little 5th grade boy, and he said, well, Before we had the Leader in Me, the teachers used to do all the work. Now we do all the work. So anyhow, that's what the Leader in Me is all about. Think of it as an operating system that helps everything you're doing in the school go so much better. And it helps the children build confidence, develop 21st century skills, learn the language of leadership, and the adults get along better, learn how to collaborate better. It gives everyone a common language through which they can resolve conflicts and become creative. And it's taken home, and it helps take the same language back into the home. And that's where you get this compound interest effect of everyone doing the same thing. So this is not something we planned. I'm here in all humility saying this is very exciting to be part of this. We feel a great sense of stewardship. Take this to as many children as possible. I feel like this is a great innovation that came from a desperate school and desperate teachers, and that's impacting schools for good all over. Today we have, as mentioned, 2,000 schools in 25 countries. We have schools in Brazil, in the slum of Rio de Janeiro. My colleagues have been to those schools, and they said they have bullet holes in their ceilings because they have drive-by shootings all the time, and the kids are trained to get under the desks when a shooting is happening in the streets. But this program is impacting those schools in a major way. We have schools throughout Europe. We have schools in China. We have schools in India, throughout the Asia-Pacific region. And it's very exciting to see this work spread. So we feel this is a wonderful program that's impacting a lot of lives. And our only mission is to, again, bring this to as many kids as possible. So I wanted to thank you, really, from the bottom of my heart for your support. Ryan's told me about all the great things you're doing and the number of schools you have going. It makes a huge difference, makes all the difference. Our education system will succeed or fail based upon the support of the community. And so when I see a Rotary Club and everything you're doing up there, when I see this, it gives me great confidence in the future for education system. So thank you so much. I'm going to open it up for questions, and I'd be happy to take a few questions in a minute.
Hi, Sean. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you sharing from your passion and insight onto where this began and where this is going. And I think it is an exciting road ahead, as you were kind of sharing and alluding to in the story about Riley and the feelings that he had is, I think, such an example of why the Leader in Me is working. And Riley's case shows it. Kids come to school with all sorts of labels that they pick up over time, whether wrongly from friends or from family. It might be, I'm no good at anything. Nobody likes me. I'm too shy to ever say anything in the middle of class. All of those things, those limiting points of view that kids have of themselves, hold them back and help them from really embracing the giftedness, the greatness that really can shine within each of them. The reason the Leader in Me is working is it begins with first enabling the teachers by investing in them, and then bringing that to the kids so that the old labels are all stripped away, and the only label that remains in bold print on every child is leader of my personal greatness. And every teacher then works with great intention to bring that to realization and give them a way of expressing that and demonstrating that. So the sense in every Leader in Me school that I've been in is a greater sense of joy, intentionality, and purpose, and that the staff and students are all on a common mission of demonstrating the capacities that they've realized that they have in themselves in greater measure. So this is really an exciting time to be part of this movement. And I'm just going to give the mic over to Greg, who's going to pass it around for anyone that might have some questions. And I might just repeat the question for Sean so he can hear that.
Thank you very much, Sean. Thank you, Brian. I'm going to walk around now. If anyone has any questions they'd like to ask either Sean or Brian, please raise your hand and I'll make my way around.
I can't hear very well, I'm sorry.
Gene. So are these, this movement, is it directed at individual schools or, say, a provincial education system, or is it just dependent on a principal at a school? In other words, can it be a global thing, like a provincial or a federal, like it's a provincial duty, a provincial thrust?
I'll just repeat the question for you. So the question was, is it an individual, is it a community, is it provincial, or is it a federal? What's the initiative? How do you implement it?
Hey Brian, maybe you could get up in front of the camera and ask me to repeat it. I wasn't able to hear the question. Okay. I can hear you.
You can hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
The question, Sean, is this initiative something that is implemented at an individual school? The question is, where does it begin? Does it begin with a principal at individual school, or is it typically initiated at more a broader level district, or right beginning with the entire provincial initiative? That's the clarity.
Okay, sure. Okay, thank you for the question. Very good question. The majority of the schools that have began when a principal or a teacher inside of a school got excited by this and started on their own. Most of the time, it has become it's bubbled up from the school itself, not from the district or the province. But increasingly, what's happening is that a school or two will start. It will spread to other schools around it. The district will find out about it, and then they get excited about it when they see the results. So, for example, right now, New York City, they have a massive school district of 500 schools, and they started with about 5. Those schools have done so well that they're currently looking at the district level at implementing this into several hundred schools inside the New York School District. So I don't think it matters where it starts. It can bubble up from an individual school. In some cases, it has been a district superintendent, got really excited by it, and then they've asked their schools to do it. Either way is fine. It can go either way, but generally most schools have started when it's a single school. Sometimes it's been a parent, gets excited, goes to the principal, hey, we got to do this. The principal gets excited, and then it gets going. The one thing we've learned is this, that if a district decides to do this, it needs to be done in a voluntary way. That a district leader should never say, all 15 of my schools, I want you to do this. You're going to do it. Instead, they should say, who would like to do this? And let a few raise their hands and get started, and then work from there. Move slow to start with has been our experience. And let it bubble up naturally. So I hope that's responsive to your question, sir.
Is there someone else that has another question for Sean?
So I hope I phrased this right, but is there any collaboration or learnings from the KIP program, the Knowledge is Power, and differentiation between socioeconomic opportunities or otherwise, if you know what I mean? So the lag time in the summer period, for instance, that lower income families might not necessarily glean the knowledge that middle and upper income families have the opportunity to gain. Does the Leadership in Me program account for that?
Okay. Yeah, I think I got your question. The KIP program, the Knowledge is Power program, I admire them. They do a great job. And they're primarily focused on helping the divide, the socioeconomic divide. There are about 140 KIP schools now. They've been very careful about growing too fast, and so I have great admiration for them. The Leader in Me is, it's got some common principles, but it's a little bit different. We find the Leader in Me does extraordinarily well in schools that are really poor, that have high free and reduced lunch, that are in tough socioeconomic conditions. I think it does well because, again, like I said, everyone's doing the same thing. It pulls in the community. It pulls in the teachers. You're not asking the teachers to just, give something to the kids, but you're asking the teachers to also change and to live these principles and to model them. And it gets into the home as well. So in the summer, the Leader in Me schools don't do anything special like the KIPP schools do. But I think generally during the school year, it's so pervasive. There's so much to it. It's not just a curriculum. It's not just something, again, that's done on Tuesday nights or Friday afternoons. It's done all the time, everywhere, all the time. Muriel always called it the ubiquitous approach. By ubiquitous, she meant everywhere, all the time. This is what we found is sometimes a classroom will say, well, we want to do the Leader in Me, and we say, well, you're better off doing it school-wide, all at once. This is where the magic happens, is everyone's doing the same program from top to bottom. You're pulling in the adults, and you're pulling in the parents of the community as well. So our experience is, though, however, in the more challenged the school is, the faster the impact of the Leader in Me is inside the school. The first thing we see is reduced discipline problems. It's always the first thing they always drop in the first few months. I've had a lot of schools that will say, hey, we had 200 discipline referrals last year, and this year we have 5, or something to that magnitude. Starts usually with the culture of the school, attendance, discipline, and then it moves, then you see academic achievement following on about 2 to 3 years later. So I hope that's responsive as well.
Thank you, Sean. We spoke pretty much at the end of your time. We have time for one quick question remaining.
Sure.
Okay, maybe one more.
Is there one more question out there? One more question for Sean Kevin?
One more question.
Hello, Sean. Thank you very much. I really like listening to you this evening. Both children are in university now, so they're right out of the public school system. And one thing as they were going through school, the tenured teachers, the teachers who were coming very close to retirement, they didn't have the same enthusiasm as the teachers who were just coming into the system. Does your ideas empower those older teachers? Does it get them back excited? Does it bring excitement to them so they're not worrying, thinking more about retirement and maybe thinking more about the children?
Sure. Yeah, good question. Thank you for asking that. Here's been our experience. The Leader in Me is as much about the adults in the school as it is the kids. Even though the students are the product, it starts with the adults. In fact, when Muriel began this, and she decided to create a leadership school, she said to her staff members, listen, we don't get along very well. We don't have a common mission. We're not resolving conflicts well. We're not going to do one thing with the kids until we as adults learn to practice this material and we get on the same page. And so she began with her staff, and they didn't do one thing with the kids for about 6 months. So the same way, we have found that this reinvigorates teachers. They typically go to the 7 Habits training at the very beginning. There's about 6 or 7 days of training that the faculty will go through, and part of it is just for them, where they learn the 7 Habits and learn to practice them. They'll often say after this was the best professional development experience I ever had, and it was about me. It was for me. It wasn't something I was supposed to give to the kids. It was about me. And it reinvigorates them. We hear this so often. This reminded me, what I'm going through right now with the Leader in Me training, it reminded me reminds me why I went into education in the first place. So we have found that to be a problem. Generally speaking, we find that this reinvigorates teachers. And if any of you there tonight have children in Leader B schools and talk with your teachers there, you'll find this is the case. So often, it reinvigorates the teachers. It reminds them as to why they're in education in the first place. It's not to teach children just how to take a test. It's to help unleash the whole child, help them realize their full potential. And it helps also the adults feel understand and find their own potential. So again, this is as much about the adults in the school as it is the kids, because isn't it silly to think that the school's going to change when the adults in the school aren't expected to change? So anyhow, I know I'm out of time, Brian. It's really hard to be on camera because I have no idea what you're thinking or feeling. But I hope you've had a good time tonight. I have spent a lot of time in Canada in the last couple of years, and I think you've got a great education system. I think there's a lot the United States could learn from your system. So I admire what you're doing there. And I'll close with this one quote. I love it. It's by Albert Schweitzer. And it kind of answers the question, sir, that you asked, that I just tried to answer there about the adults. And it goes like this. He said this: in everyone's life, at some time, our inner fire burns out. It is then burst into flame by an encounter with another human being. We should all be grateful for those people who rekindle the spirit. So that's what the Leader Me is all about ultimately, is it's an encounter with another human being that bursts into flame the potential that we all have. So I wish you the best. Thank you so much for your support. Love Rotary. Good luck, and talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you so much for those words. Thank you for inspiring our group here this evening and inspiring us all to be fire starters of the flames of inspiration and greatness that we know that is found in our children everywhere. So thanks again, and we'll let you go with a wave and have a great evening. And I think you have some dinner waiting for you still. Bye, Sean.